Breaking tonight, a devastating wave of airstrikes across Iran is raising global alarm after schools, hospitals, and historic landmarks were reportedly hit during a joint US-Israeli bombing campaign. Images emerging from multiple Iranian cities show collapsed buildings, shattered classrooms, and emergency crews digging through rubble. Children, teachers, patients, and civilians are believed to be among the victims. International organizations are now calling for urgent investigations as the scale of civilian damage becomes clearer. The strikes are part of a rapidly escalating military confrontation between Iran, Israel, and the United States that began in late February. According to reports from human rights groups and Iranian authorities, more than 1,000 civilians may have been killed in just the first days of the bombing campaign, with thousands more injured. One of the deadliest incidents occurred in the southern Iranian city of Minab. There, a girls' elementary school known as Shajare Tayyebe was struck during school hours. The building was packed with young students when multiple air-delivered munitions exploded nearby. Rescue teams pulled children's backpacks and books from beneath collapsed concrete as families searched desperately for survivors. Iranian officials say more than 100 children were killed in that single strike, making it one of the most tragic civilian incidents of the conflict. ABC News. Independent satellite imagery analysis indicates that the school stood close to a compound associated with Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. Investigators believe the area was targeted as part of a broader strike against military infrastructure. However, experts say intelligence errors or targeting failures may have led to the catastrophic strike on the school itself. A U.S. military investigation is now examining whether American forces were responsible for the attack. Early findings from the probe suggest that U.S. aircraft operating in the region may have launched the munition that struck the school, though officials stress that the investigation is still ongoing. Reuters. The Pentagon has stated that U.S. forces do not deliberately target civilian facilities, but the incident has triggered intense international scrutiny. Beyond the school attack, reports from humanitarian groups indicate that numerous civilian facilities across Iran have been damaged in the wider bombing campaign. Iranian authorities say at least 20 educational institutions, 11 hospitals, and multiple ambulance and medical centers have been affected by the strikes. Middle East Eye. Several historic landmarks have also suffered damage. Among them is the Golestan Palace in Tehran, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that dates back centuries and is considered one of the most important cultural landmarks in Persian history. Shockwaves from nearby explosions damaged parts of the palace complex, including decorative halls and historic gardens. UNESCO has warned that damage to such cultural heritage sites could represent a violation of international conventions protecting historic monuments during wartime. The strikes are part of a broader military operation launched on February 28, when Israel announced a nationwide offensive against Iranian military and strategic targets. The operation, described by Israeli officials as a preemptive strike against security threats, involved coordinated air and missile attacks across several Iranian regions. Explosions were reported in Tehran and other major cities as airspace closures were imposed and emergency services rushed to respond. The United States has acknowledged supporting aspects of the operation, though officials have provided limited details about the extent of its involvement. Washington and Tel Aviv say the campaign is aimed at degrading Iran's military capabilities, including missile infrastructure and military bases. Iran, however, has accused both countries of deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure and committing war crimes. Tehran has taken its accusations to the United Nations Security Council, demanding international condemnation and accountability. At emergency meetings in New York, diplomats heard warnings that attacks on schools, hospitals, and civilian areas could violate international humanitarian law. Under the laws of armed conflict, civilian infrastructure is protected unless it is being used for military purposes. Legal experts say determining whether the strikes violated those laws will depend on what intelligence was available to commanders at the time and whether adequate precautions were taken to avoid civilian harm. The situation has also triggered outrage inside Iran. Thousands of mourners gathered in the streets for mass funerals following the school bombing. Images from the ceremonies show rows of small coffins draped in flags as families grieve the loss of their children. Chants against the United States and Israel echoed through the crowds as anger and sorrow spread across the country. At the same time, the wider regional situation is becoming increasingly volatile. Iran has already launched retaliatory missile and drone attacks targeting Israeli territory and US positions across the Middle East. Some of those strikes have reportedly caused civilian casualties outside Iran as well, including deaths in Israel and other nearby countries. Military analysts say the conflict now risks expanding into a broader regional war. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important shipping lanes, lies close to several of the areas targeted in southern Iran. Any disruption there could send shockwaves through global energy markets. Diplomatic pressure is mounting as governments around the world call for restraint. The United Nations, the European Union, and several international human rights organizations have urged all sides to avoid attacks that could harm civilians. Human rights investigators are also calling for independent inquiries into the school strike and other incidents involving civilian sites. For Washington and Tel Aviv, the military campaign is being framed as part of a broader effort to counter Iran's missile and nuclear ambitions. But critics warn that civilian casualties could undermine international support and escalate tensions even further. Strategic analysts say the coming days will be critical. If the strikes continue and retaliation intensifies, the confrontation could spiral into a wider Middle East conflict involving multiple countries. There are also concerns that diplomatic channels between Iran and Western powers, already strained for years, could collapse completely. For now, rescue teams in several Iranian cities continue to search through rubble, hoping to find survivors. Hospitals are overwhelmed with wounded civilians, and families across the country are mourning loved ones lost in the bombing campaign. As the world watches closely, one question remains unanswered: whether the escalating violence can still be contained, or whether the region is now entering a far more dangerous phase of conflict. https://justtime.com, U738536 Iran. Civilians killed girls, school.utm, source ChatGPT.com. More than 1,000 civilians killed in US-Israeli bombing of Iran, rights group says. https:// www.abc.net.eu News 2026-03 Iran school children killed. Strikes us Israel 100 dead, 106402152. UTM source, ChatGPT.com. More than 100 children dead in US and Israel strike on. Brittany, https www.reuters.com World Middle East.US investigation points. Likely US responsibility. Iran school strike sources say 2026-03-06 UTM source ChatGPT.com. US investigation points to likely US responsibility in Iran school strike, sources say. https://www.middleeasti.net live blog update. Iran says Israeli-US strikes hit schools, hospitals and medical. UTM source, ChatGPT.com. Iran says Israeli-US strikes hit schools, hospitals and